Welcome back to the show. Well, the theater productions, the theatrical productions, they keep coming. We are so blessed here in this city, in this community. My next guest is going to introduce you to a play going on in Osgood. Really amazing Sherlock Holmes story, and my next guest will tell you why it's her favorite. I'm joined by Shauna Akkermans. She is the director of Ken Ludwig's Baskerville, a Sherlock Holmes story. Welcome. Great to have you here, Shauna.
Thank you for having me.
And this is done through ITR Theater.
Yes.
It's exciting times because you have a big anniversary coming up next year,
yes,
right?
Yes. So 2023 is going to mark 50 years for ITR. The first performance was in 1973, so 50 years.
Tell me a little bit about the history behind ITR.
Yeah, so ITR was founded in Manotick. So their first performance was actually Jesus Christ Superstar, and they went on to perform in Manotick for years. And they picked the name ITR. It's actually stands for Isle in the River Theater Review. We'll call it ITR because that's a bit of a mouthful.
yeah, I gotcha.
And so they've gone on to continue do community theater. We moved from Manotick to Osgood with sort of the change of space and so on. So, but yeah.
What about your background in theater? Tell me about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I studied theater at Bishop's University.
Oh, wow, nice.
So I graduated. You know what? I'm not going to tell you that.
Listen, we were just talking about the 50th anniversary of this theater company. You were so young, you didn't even see the first 20 years, probably, right?
No, definitely
not. See, there you go. You're okay. I'm 52 years old. You're okay.
Perfect.
You're doing good.
So I graduated and I moved to Ottawa.
Okay.
So pursued theater here. I've done fringe shows and stuff, but recently I've been working with ITR. I connected with them during the pandemic. We were doing virtual shows when in person was not happening, and I was on stage with them last year, and now I'm directing this one. So.
Well, let's talk about this story, because I said off the top, you said this is your favorite Sherlock Holmes story. Why is it your favorite?
Yeah, so I think Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is like the most interesting writer. He went through like quite a life, and I think you can see the pieces of his life in this show. He was in this story, but he was a doctor beforehand, and he fell in love with a different woman before his wife passed away, and you can see some of that in this story.
Okay.
And after he returned from the war, he went to Devonshire and heard of these stories of a manor that was haunted, and that was what inspired him to write Baskerville.
Okay.
But he had killed Sherlock Holmes off in The Final Problem like 8 years before this story was published.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yes. So he published The Final Problem in 1893.
Okay.
And then Baskerville was published in like 1901, and he wanted to write other things. He didn't want to write Sherlock Holmes, and he sort of came begrudgingly back to like the most iconic fictional detective.
Yeah, I'm like, why would you not want to write about him again? But I mean, he's a writer. You want to expand and do different things.
Serious history things is what he apparently wanted to write. But then this was like the reemergence of Sherlock Holmes. 2 years later, he wrote another story, and then he continued to write for Sherlock Holmes after this. So The Hound of the Baskervilles is like the return of Doyle writing about Sherlock Holmes.
Right. So, okay, expand on the story then. What do we find in this story?
Yeah. So this takes place in Devonshire. So not in London. There's some action that happens in London.
Okay.
But there is a earl who owns a manor, and he dies mysteriously. And Dr. Mortimer and Sir Henry come to Sherlock Holmes and say, hey, this weird thing happened, could you help us? Because they're afraid for Sir Henry's safety, that the same thing that happened to his uncle, I believe, is going to happen to him. And then, Sherlock and Watson go to help and solve the mystery of the dog and on the moor and the hound. Yeah.
I have to ask you this because, we asked all of our guests to sort of send us some discussion points.
Yes.
Okay. And one of your discussion points caught my eye right away.
Yeah.
It was the influence of Pochinko the Clown on your style of directing.
Yeah.
Tell myself and the viewers about Pochinko and why this clown has been such an influence on your style.
Yeah, so Richard Pachinko was a Canadian clown who actually was from Manitoba, and he sort of studied a number of different clown schools and developed what is sort of now taught in Canada as clown technique. And so it's called the Pachinko style of clown. And you know, I worked with, had some experience at Bishop's with Pachinko, with the style, not with Richard because he's since passed.
Yes.
But you know, there's lessons that we learn in clown of like leaning into the magic of live theater, and when you know things fall over or when things go wrong, of like not just ignoring them and leaning into it and making a moment of it, and letting go of the perfectionism of trying to be, you know, perfect and do the same thing every single night and hit your blocking in exactly the same way, because live theater is magical in that way. That
was it refreshing for the actors then, like when you started telling them about this? Or how did they respond?
Yeah, there's mixed. There's definitely some mixed response, and with the crew as well. Because it's a bit of a stretch. It's a challenge for people, but that is also what I wanted to bring with this show, is a challenge and to teach new skills and to teach new techniques to people.
But no, I think it's brilliant. I really do. You know, because we're having so much theater coming back. Just speak to the importance of theater in the community, not just for, you know, the cast and the crew, but for attendees.
Yeah, you know, I think community theater specifically gets to bring something different than, you know, the regional theaters or the national stage, because it is accessible. Our tickets are $20. And you know, if you come to dinner and a show, it's $65, but you get dinner.
Yeah, and you brought that back, which is exciting.
Which is exciting. But you know, and we produce in rural South Ottawa. We produce in Osgood. So you know, people don't need to travel 30 minutes to see a show. They don't need to drive into the city or worry about parking. We produce in the community, in those spaces. So.
Fantastic. All right. Want to remind everybody where and when it's out. I know we brought it up on screen, so a big thanks to you, Shauna.
Yeah, thank you.
And congratulations to you and your team for putting this on. Ken Ludwig's Baskerville, a Sherlock Holmes story. It's happening at Stewart Holmes Arena. That's in Osgood. The run is November 25th to 27th and December 2nd to the 4th. We'll be back with more right after this.